Thank you, Chairman. Secretary of State, the Spanish Presidency presided over a 6-month period when we saw the most outrageous speculation in the financial markets by hedge fund operators and speculators of various characters against member states of the European Union. Greece was just the worst example. Spain, Portugal, Ireland also were the subject of their activities. Now, you as Trade Minister must know that the more resources that are soaked up by these parasites on the financial markets, the deeper the economic crisis that will develop in services and in manufacturing, simply by virtue of the fact that so many public funds that should be going into investment in infrastructure and public services are going instead to pay the speculation of the markets. Can I ask you, how do you justify the fact that the Spanish government, like the government in my own country, indeed in Ireland, that you have simply capitulated to the speculators? You are now conducting vicious assaults on the living standards of the Spanish working class, just as in Ireland, the rights of Spanish pensioners, etc. But you did not lift a finger to stop the speculators or to change that system, with catastrophic consequences for trade, for economic growth, etc. And second point, Secretary of State, can I ask you, with regard to the free trade agreement with Colombia and Peru, how do you justify flying in the face of the opposition of all the trade union movement in Colombia and organisations representing indigenous groups, human rights defenders, etc., who did not want this agreement because it underpins a government which has a horrific record of human rights violations? Now, Spain took over the presidency shortly after the La Macarena mass grave was uncovered, the victims of extrajudicial killings, undoubtedly by security forces or forces aligned to them. How can it be interpreted as anything else except giving comfort and aid to a government in Colombia that is guilty of these infractions of human rights? Or was it that the interests of Spanish big business was put before the question of human rights? And lastly, Chairman, on a similar line with the agreement with the Central American governments, how do you justify continuing and carrying on negotiations with a government in Honduras, which is a government resulting from a stitched-up process which started off with a coup? What kind of a signal is that sending out to the world with regard to what the European Union is prepared to do to secure trade deals for its businesses and so on? Thank you, Chairman.
And now going on to the questions raised by Mr. Higgins from the GUI group. He asked why we gave in to speculators when this had very negative consequences on trade. According to our figures, international trade, beginning by the most general situation, is increasing by 25%. That's a very significant rate. And we think that last year, which was the worst financial year since the Second World War, international trade fell by 12% then, and trade is helping us to achieve economic growth and employment. And of course, you referred to the Spanish case. The external sector is the one which is helping us to grow, and so that consequences on employment and activity in our country are not as bad as they could have been. For example, in 2009, the external sector in Spain brought in 2.8% growth to GNP, and in 2010 we think it will be more than 1.5% growth for GNP. The 2020 strategy is something which will help us to continue our development and to build things up in the trade sector. On the question about agreements with Colombia and Peru, there's no doubt that all these questions you raised are extremely important, and I know that in Parliament they've been debated at considerable length, and there was even a mission by members of Parliament to Colombia to try to see in the field what the development of the respective human rights had been. From the information we have at our disposal, everybody will agree that progress has been made. The International Labour Organization has reflected that in its reports, as has the United Nations, and the European Commission has also noted that progress has been made in all the areas which you raised or you referred to. And these questions, which I think that we can group under the heading of sustainable development, are the subject of top attention in all our new generation agreements, which the EU is signing, particularly the respect of social rights and labour rights are questions which are raised specifically in these agreements, and the Commission will be following very closely the development of this situation as we implement the trade agreements. And I think that that's answered all the questions.